Hi everyone. I wanted to talk to you today about what I think is the peak mechanic of all time in game design, in gaming history that I've noticed. And it is context anticipation, or context manipulation, or context predictability, or context reversal, whatever you want to call it. Essentially, if you start with the game philosophy of Gabe Newell, where he said the fundamental thing we want to do is understand what is fun. And he says that essentially if you have an input and the game doesn't react, it feels like the game's annoying, ignoring you, and it doesn't actually read your inputs. So he says whenever you do something in the game, you want the game to react. You want there to be a hit marker when you shoot something. You want there to be a pathway when you look behind a visible wall or waterfall, etc. And, realism has nothing to do with that. It's about the game reacting to your input. So if I'm in a marketplace in Call of Duty, I expect that when I shoot the stalls, they're going to blow up or explode, or at least something will react to the player's input. However, what I've noticed that the best games and the most interesting, memorable experiences are the games that not only respond to your input, that respond to your context. Another very popular term is, can you pet the doggo? I.e., is there a dog in the game? And if there is a dog, you should be able to interact with it in some way. You should be able to pet it. Prime example, Twilight Princess. There are, I think, cats and dogs in that starting Ordon village, and you can't pet them, but you can pick them up. There's something you can do to interact with this object in the game. It exists, it has a purpose, it's a reason. It's not just salad dressing. Like, for example, a game like Cyberpunk. Yes, there's a lot of things you can interact with, but most of the stuff in modern games are just dressing. They exist because they're there, and they don't really have a significant interaction. Starfield's another example where it's like you have all these individual apples and protein bars and all these items and coffee mugs you can all pick up that are completely useless unless you melt them down for credits or supplies or whatever. And they're modeled beautifully, but they are essentially pointless. Like, there is nothing significant you can do with it. You can pick it up, you can drag it around, and you can interact with it. But even there, it's at least acknowledging your input. But even there, the interaction is kind of devoid of meaning. It's there because it feels like a checklist. You should be able to do this. And yes, that's cool. But if we go further that into game design, I find the best scenarios are the ones that predict context. So if there's an animal or a dog, let's say, and you press the interact button, you don't know what's going to happen, but there could be a variety of things that happen. The normal thing is that the character reaches out and pets the dog, and you're like, great, good, we did the checklist. What's more compelling is when you reach out to pet the dog and it bites you, or it runs away, or it turns around and it has a human face or something, I don't know. That context anticipation, when I really thought about it in that style, I thought of my favorite video game moments. Case in point being the Metal Gear Solid fight, the Psycho Mantis fight from Metal Gear Solid. That level of messing with the player where you're fighting Psycho Mantis and he reads your memory card. So you like to play Castlevania. That element is probably the most memorable boss fight in all of gaming for quite a few people, because it's doing something. It's breaking the fourth wall, but it's messing with the player's perception of what's possible. It's like, okay, this boss has some weird gimmick and I have to figure it out, and then he starts reading your memory card. And it's funny that that's never ever happened again. Like, I can think of games that have had you navigate a fake version of your memory files and use them as little icons in the fight, like an Inscription, or there's some other game I thought of, but no one actually went as far as this boss fight from 1997, 1998, where the boss reads your memory cards and tells you about it. Like, no one's even attempted that. Another way and another style of doing this that's really good for messing around with the player's psyche is, of course, the horror genre. And so immediately I'm going to games like Silent Hill and Eternal Darkness. And so Silent Hill, definitely, that the entire game is messing with your expectation and your intent. It's not just, oh, I'm pressing a button, but the Silent Hill team is thinking, what is the intent behind pressing the button? You know, the characters going through a hospital, they're solving puzzles, they get a key, they think, oh, this is a key for the third floor, I should go for the third floor. And then they get to the third floor and something's changed, something's different. It's messed with your intent. They must have really played and experienced their game, and then it's like they built another game within that game to mess with all of your expectations. It's almost as like if you were doing a new game plus and everything was different in a way specifically to make you feel a certain way or uncomfortable or weird. And it's like they took a new game plus and that base game and they just put it as the base game, which is really, really interesting and really, really cool. So, for example, in Silent Hill, because I was talking to someone, and they said their biggest moment in Silent Hill 1 was that they're going through the hospital, and they've, like, explored all 3 floors with an elevator in the hospital. They've explored everything, and they're like, okay, I've found all this stuff. I know there has to be a way forward. I just don't know exactly where it is yet, because at this point, they've explored the last room of the 3rd floor. They exit that room. They said the music changes, and when they get back to the elevator, there's a 4th floor. So that's what Silent Hill is. It's a psychological game that's always messing with you. It's always anticipating your input or your context, and it's taking the context and messing around with it. Eternal Darkness does this, I would argue, maybe even better, as much if not better, with the insanity meter, or sanity meter rather, when it drains. Where it has things like, you know, the video and the volume, and that's kind of unfortunately not relevant as much today, because those interfaces on CRTs don't actually work the same way as they used to. Modern TVs don't have the same interface, so it's not going to fool you. But there are some things like, the character's head falling off, sure, but there's some things like the menu popping up and say we've successfully deleted your game save data. That was on the screen long enough for me to think, maybe that's a real message, maybe, because it was fully serious, and then it faded back to gameplay. But I have to tell you, like, that moment absolutely shook me. So this whole idea of messing with the context of what the player is doing and what they could believe is possible it's been the most memorable experiences. And I was talking about context and context shifting. Another really good use or example of this is Yoko Taro. And it's interesting because he doesn't do these little, like Kojima will do these little scenarios where you have to do one specific gimmick and then it'll mess around with you. But Yoko Taro, he will have a whole story arc where these guys are the bad guys and these guys are the good guys, and it's only at the end of that arc that you do like another playthrough and it completely reverses the context, where it turns out, oh, all these enemies were actually just, you know, thinking, feeling, empathetic living things, and you were just slaughtering all of them thinking that they were just evil the whole time. So even Taro does that, and he actually has a term for it called like reverse story writing, where he'll start at the end and he'll have a really messed up story, and then he'll like cover it up with deception and innocence, and all of the skeletons beneath and the story and the messed up architecture are slowly revealed from the start, which I think is a really interesting way to do it. But more so than that, again, you have a context reversal, but only in these massive chunks. And this typically does happen in a hero story scenario where you have the revelation of truth in the middle of the story, where the hero finds something else about themselves, like maybe they're half demon or half angel, and then they have to reconcile that, and then they find their true identity again, and they continue to the end of the story. But there's always some truth point. There's always some new context added that changes everything. And so for Taro and other developers, you can either do this in chunks or even in little microsections. But again, they're the most interesting aspects of the gaming experience where, I mean, Todd Howard said it best. You see that mountain, you can go there. And it's true. When you look at a game or a system, my best moments are the intuitive components. It's like I'm thinking, hey, there's a torch, there's a flame like Ocarina. If I put the wooden torch beside the flame, will it catch on fire, allowing me to take it to the other torch? Yes. And no one told me that. I figured it out on my own, and it was like mind expansion. Like, oh, I see a thing I think is possible, and I go to try to do it, and it works. That level of experimentation is, I think, it's present in all the best games out there. Minecraft, sure, that's like what the entire game is kind of based around. That whole component is like, I think I can make this structure, or I think I can construct this mechanism, and you go to do it, it actually works, or it works 90% and you fix it. An alternative to that would be Tears of the Kingdom, which was a lot of fun. Just the physics mechanic in that game is, frankly, it's insane, and it doesn't feel like a Zelda mechanic. It feels like it could have been something completely different, but you still have this element where you're in the world, you're in the wild, and you're constructing these mechanisms out of tools that aren't an infinite range of possibilities, but a finite but very diverse range that have meaningful returns. If you make a really good machine, a fan blade machine or whatever, it will service you well. It will, operate well for you. And if you build it poorly, you will have a poor experience. And just the amount and array of designs and experimentation and success and failures you can get, and iterations. I think anyone who's played Tears of the Kingdom to the end has experienced the aspect of building something and building versions of it, adding more components and building on top of it, which again is just so cool and so fun. Another aspect of the gameplay context shift experience that is completely opposite from horror and Silent Hill are games like Mother and Deltarune, where you'll have these scenarios where you'll have an object like a vase, and you can interact with the vase and say it's a vase. And usually in most games that's enough, that's sufficient. But if you keep talking to the vase, it might say something like it's a beautiful vase, or it's a really beautiful vase, and then maybe the vase falls over and it's like, oh no, you admired the vase so much it fell and broke. And then if you interact with it again, it says the vase forgives you. So it's this idea that, Toby Fox is really, really smart, because what he's doing for a lot of the game, and where a lot of the game's humor comes from, is anticipating the interaction from the player. And kind of fortunately for him, like Undertale, I think was made in RPG Maker or something, but a very basic program. So you're working with basically like a little sprite on a grid. So it's a very simple system, but the amount of creativity you do and you use in that simple system is a testament to his talent. And what he's doing essentially is he's just anticipating what the player will do with very simple things. So yeah, like there's a object in a room, and like Earthbound kind of does this, where there will be an object in a room, you can interact with it, and it will have unusual dialogue. It'll have like a very hyper personalized mood to it. And so you interact with a plant or an inanimate object, and it'll say the plant is feeling sassy, or the plant is feeling sad, or the plant is feeling happy. It'll have this intense personalization. And Toby, I think, takes that and evolves it further by having a layered level of dialogue and text in those interactions, where you're almost telling a miniature story just through a sprite and object character interaction that is so basic and so banal in every game that he makes it interesting and funny by sometimes the sheer virtue of how many times you can interact with this thing, that it's literally nothing, but it has layers of dialogue and context to it. And I think that's what Undertale and Deltarune are kind of becoming these layers and layers of context and intuitive storytelling and characters, which is fine. It's just that it could be more than that, and I don't want to speak on too much what it could be or where it's going, but that's kind of like a core concept that you can layer multiple experiences in a very basic interaction. And so it's this interesting thing where, again, like Undertale and Deltarune, they're, from a gameplay standard, they're obviously not the best games ever, but from a story and interaction and like extra whatever perspective, they have some of the most memorable moments. They have these moments where these characters do these things, or these objects react in a certain manner. Like, you could interact with the garbage can and suddenly it's a rocket and it goes off to space. Like, that'd be completely normal in Deltarune because it's all about anticipating context and then doing something else completely different, or doing something that you just wouldn't expect, or doing something that actually is in character with that character when they do appear, or a character hides another thing. And it's always constantly messing and joking with you. And that's kind of the entirety of Deltarune. It's where nothing is as it appears, and there's always a new layer behind it. And the point is that whether it's a horror game or a comedy game, this element stands true. I just think that's so fascinating. And that's kind of, again, we come back to peak game design. What do you actually remember about the game? Even though the story might have been super straightforward and really good, and the combat was good, and the lighting and the graphics were good, what we tend to remember most are these moments where it feels like the game is almost interacting back with us. I think Inscryption is a great example of those interactions, where the entire premise of the game and the horror element is that the game is alive. It's a living thing that is actually interacting back with us. And with the age of AI, I don't know how that is going to shift and feel, because I thought about it this way. In a perfect world, you would make your game, you would send it out, everyone would play test it, and then you would make a better version of that game, anticipating all those things and then fixing all those things. So an example is like, there's some guy who says, we have playtesters, we playtest the game, but once it reaches mass audience, there's like the 1% of players that somehow find a way to break it. They find some way to bust the code or bust this one thing, or they get around the tutorial and they're like, oh God, I forgot to fix that or program that or patch that. And it's embarrassing. But it's also not embarrassing because the 1% of players that do that kind of thing that found it. If it was 50% of players, then yeah, that would be embarrassing, looking at you, Bethesda. And yet, even in Bethesda, there's like a meta where as long as the glitches are consistent, you kind of get used to them. And they're very funny a lot of the time. So in a perfect world, you would make a game, everyone in the world would play it, everyone would play test it, and then you re-release it with everything fixed. So it's like, okay, I'm in the tutorial level, there's a ledge, I think it's too far away, I can't reach it. Oh, okay. Let me go in and put, yellow paint on it, low hanging bar. Let's put yellow paint on the ledge that you can jump to reinforce that, yes, you can jump to this. And in a perfect world, in a perfect game designer world, we would anticipate every player interaction, every possible way the player is reacting with the object. And it's really interesting because there's a whole subjective nature to that, where obviously, like an object and the way someone anticipates it'll work and how you anticipate someone will use it is never going to be exactly how you think they'll use it. In fact, a lot of the coolest and most interesting exploits in games and in speedrunning and cheating or whatever are, of course, using those systems that the game developer never intended you to use it that way. Whether you're farming or reloading an environment or going into a save state or riding along a wall or abusing some mechanic, it's almost more interesting that way. Because if we lived in a perfect world, those exploits and those nuances would not exist. The friggin' Ocarina speedruns where you have to essentially, like after the Goma fight, I don't know exactly how it works, but it's like like a floating number essentially, and you enter into a debug menu somehow by dying on the frame. You also win, and so therefore you start doing, all Link starts doing all these weird hopping inputs, left, right, up, down, and suddenly you've accessed a debug menu that allows you to warp right to the end fight or the credits or something. And that's obviously not intentional, and most people won't ever find that out, but it's amazing we found it out in the first place. But it's so interesting that is a thing that can happen, because there's no way to anticipate all the different ways that the player will interact. But the more ways you can predict they will interact, and the more you can put up things to change and subvert that, it's a way more interesting and way more entertaining experience. And again, because of the subjective nature of games, the intended experience and the actual experience, or the meme experience that everyone talks about, oh yeah, this game is great, except for the, like Blighttown, or this one aspect or this one level that's really terrible. That's also part of the experience and the memory of a game. Like, no one likes Blighttown, right? In Dark Souls. But everyone remembers Blighttown. Like, it is an experience, regardless of whether it being good or not. We still have an emotional experience connected to that experience. Another example of game developers messing with people are things like Hollow Knight and Dark Souls. As I was just talking, for example, Hollow Knight, I know Silksong, I haven't played Hollow Knight for a while, but Silksong, there were at least 2 benches, save points, that were fake. And the whole fake save point thing is one of the most intense experiences I think you can experience in a video game, because it's like, oh, this is safe, this is the place I can rest, I can pause the game. It's like, and once you establish that rule, an exception to it is such a huge deal. I think Daryl Talked Games did a video essay on that. I think it's his best work. It's so interesting about the violation of Xenia, essentially ancient Greek style hospitality. Ancient style where someone's traveling through a country and you take care of them, you house them, you feed them, etc., and you treat them like a guest. And the violation of that holy principle is what it feels like in gaming, is when you can't save at the save point. And so again, I really think about, I definitely remember the 2 benches in Silksong where they were fake, it fell through the floor, the other one was a trap. And so those experiences transcend just, oh, it's just a game, it's just, I won, I beat the boss. It's like, oh no, the game is like interacting with me, it's messing with me. It has this sense of, I planted this little trap and bomb here to mess with you and to basically have fun with you and play with you. And so it's a higher level of interaction, because it's not just, oh, I shot this enemy and they don't take damage because they're invincible at this time. It's like, no, I'm getting deep inside your head. I'm getting inside the context of the situation, and that's what I'm messing with. So to Gabe Newell, to say that, yes, we want to acknowledge the player's input, I would say go even farther. Acknowledge the player's context, their frame of mind as they're experiencing this moment in the game, and put something in there to shift that or change that or subvert or whatever. And that's pretty much all I have to say. That is, I think, core gaming, peak gaming content, where it's a level of unexpected nuance that still fits in the framework of the game, that kind of messes with the player in a fun, cheeky way. I think those are my favorite moments in games, besides just the classic I beat it kind of thing. Anyway, that's all I gotta say. Yeah, I'll see you guys later. Bye.